Congresswoman Shelley Berkley has a primary opponent after all. One-time foe Byron Giorgio dropped out of the race, some suggest at the urging of Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. But can the meddler-in-chief work his magic again? Not according to our guest tonight. Barry Ellsworth is taking on Shelley Berkley, and he joins us to explain why. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me.
Well, so most people watching this program have no idea who you are. We're going to talk a little bit about your background. You were a stockbroker at one time. You created a green energy company. You made some money. You've been living in Las Vegas, and now you've decided Shelley Berkley is, to use your words, corrupt and incompetent? Really?
Yeah, on my website, www.barryellsworth.us. Okay,
the answer to your first question is to cite your website. It's like Jerry Brown when he was running for president, for God's sake.
I've got a letter that I wrote to an open letter to the citizens of Nevada. In the letter, I explain exactly what they did. They passed two bills. Okay, Graham Leach Bliley created the too big to fail banks. The Commodities Futures Modernization Act made it illegal for anyone to regulate derivatives. Okay. They all voted for those bills. So when these people say, one time Harry Reid, 3 years ago, was on TV and he said, I didn't have anything to do with unemployment. And that's not true. They caused all of this. In that letter, I prove what they do, and then you can go listen to John Dingell and Senator Byron Dorgan say, before they voted on those bills, if you pass these bills, it will cause massive taxpayer bailout. And they went ahead and voted anyway.
You think that's corruption and incompetent? That's where those words come from?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't going to talk about this first, but I'm going to switch gears. Because you mentioned Graham Leach Bliley, and you mentioned the subsequent bill that Phil Gramm supported, which was the mortgage bill. There's a lot of controversy over, as you know, what really caused the meltdown. And a lot of people think that you're just flat out wrong about Graham Leach Bliley, that it had very, very little effect at all. And in fact, let me show you what factcheck.org says about that. It says people commonly believe that, but the truth is, however, Graham Leach Bliley Act had little, if anything, to do with the current crisis. In fact, economists on both sides of the political spectrum have suggested that the act has probably made the crisis less severe than it might otherwise have been. A New York Times columnist and expert David Leonhardt wrote a long column saying that's not true, too. For people who don't know, that essentially repealed most of Glass-Steagall, which had separated commercial banking from other banking. You say you prove it in your letter. You don't prove anything. I'll give you a chance right now to prove that caused the meltdown.
When I say the proof, anybody, I've been in finance my entire life, okay? Anytime you show me an unregulated market, okay, you're going to have the Great Depression. Unregulated market caused the 1907 Depression. Unregulated market caused the Great Depression. They exempted the savings and loans and let them be unregulated, and we know where that ended up.
Glass-Steagall was a reaction to what happened in the Great Depression.
Exactly. What Glass-Steagall did, it made it illegal for anyone that was an officer or director in a brokerage house, which what they do is inherently risky. They're gamblers, okay? You could not be an officer or director in a commercial bank, a depositor bank where you and I put our money. Okay, or an insurance company. They couldn't even be a board of directors or officers, so there was no conflict of interest. For 70 years, that worked. 70 years. And then they came along and said, no, we'll do it. Everybody that says this kind of stuff, they're being paid. They're shields.
Factcheck.org is not a shield for anybody. Come on. No, seriously, though, there are a lot of different things that caused this crisis. A lot of people think. I've read a lot about this myself. The subsequent act that you did mention, the mortgage...
Commodities Futures Modernization Act.
Right, by Phil Gramm. That is blamed by a lot of people because that did have some bit impact on the derivatives regulation and later the whole regulation of the mortgage industry, or lack thereof, is what a lot of people think caused it. But are you going to blame Shelley Berkley for this? I mean, I think you know that the Gramm-Bliley Act passed by overwhelming majorities in both houses.
Anything that's important, okay, just like the NDAA, the president just signed.
National Defense Authorization
Act. Yeah, which gave
right?
the president the authority to arrest anyone that he thinks is suspected of being a friend of a terrorist. Okay, they always vote. They say they're going to help the middle class and they're going to support the middle class. And then when it comes time to vote, they protect the rich and the corporate interests that fund their campaigns.
I don't remember Obamacare passing by an overwhelming majority, did it?
That didn't do half of what Graham Leach Bliley did. Graham Leach Bliley also took away everybody's personal privacy. Okay? The Commodities Act, if you would have had... The people we elect to go to Washington, they're supposed to go there and create laws that benefit the majority of us. If they would have had sensible mortgage regulation, meaning you have to put 10% down, the bank actually has to pick up the phone and do some work and run a bureau on you to call your employer and see if you really work there, we wouldn't have had the housing market.
We have to take a break, Mr. Ellsworth. When we come back, I do want to talk a little bit about your background and why you're the right guy to go to Washington and help fix some of this stuff. We'll be back with Barry Ellsworth. He's a Democrat. He was actually against TARP, too. You don't hear a lot of Democrats say that. That was the bailout of the banks. We'll be back to talk to him in a little while. He's a Democrat running for the U.S. Senate, so he says, against Shelley Berkeley. I wonder if Harry Reid will call into the program live to try to get him out. Stick around. Welcome back across Nevada to Face a little later. We're going to read some of your feedback right here on the air. But first, it's going to be a great, eventful political year, as always, and a campaign year here in Nevada. Shelley Berkeley may actually have a primary opponent after all. Barry Ellsworth is a guy who started up a green energy company here in Nevada, and now he says he's going to run for the U.S. Senate because Shelley Berkeley and a whole lot of them are corrupt and incompetent. You talk about Wall Street very compellingly, both now and on your website, but you are of Wall Street. I mean, you're a guy who started as a stockbroker. You made all kinds of money from the financial industry. You're part of the problem, aren't you?
No, I'm not part of the problem. There's nothing wrong with making money, okay? Today, somebody that you've had on your show recently, that's a friend of mine, Danny, I sent him something. I said, "Look, Danny, it's, in this race."
Danny Tarkanian, you talk about?
There's not sides, okay? There's about doing good and doing what's right, okay? What we need is some moral people. And there's moral people in all walks of life. We need moral people to go back and do what's right, okay? What they're doing is not right.
Did Danny Tarkanian tell you were crazy to run?
No,
he didn't.
No. Eddie Bernstein did.
Eddie Bernstein did. Oh gosh, you're really name dropping here. Hopefully there's an Eddie Bernstein commercial coming up so people know who he is. But seriously, let's talk about your message to Nevadans. You mentioned it. It's on your website. I'm gonna do you a favor and read part of it for you so people know what you're talking about. All right. In 2009, ExxonMobil made $19 billion in profits, according to SEC filings, paid no taxes, and received a $156 million rebate from the IRS, which is really money that comes from your pocket and mine. This is obscenely unfair and needs to be stopped. A level playing field needs to be created where everyone pays their fair share. You've got that populist rhetoric going already. You could be in politics, sir. But let's be serious about this because, again, I think you might have a problem here. You talk about obscene. A lot of people would say, you know what's obscene? All those subsidies given to ethanol companies, which is what you started. You know I was going there.
Okay.
So you've enjoyed the fruits of this taxpayer subsidized industry. You're going to explain it. I got to read something first, then you can talk. Your company is the fourth now, very successful, fourth largest producer of ethanol. A year ago, the New York Times wrote about the end of ethanol subsidies after 3 decades. Ethanol subsidies have cost taxpayers, listen to this, sir, $20 billion, resulted in higher costs for consumers too, they argued. The Government Accountability Office, an investigative arm of Congress, said the increasing demand for corn for ethanol production has contributed to higher corn prices. The higher prices have created additional income for corn producers, but also appear to have increased costs to meat and poultry producers, big food companies, and grocery stores, I believe. All right? What about that?
Okay. There was a 51-cent subsidy, okay? And you know who gets the subsidy? The blender, the oil companies. They're the only people that are subsidized, and except in a few...
That doesn't help your company? That doesn't help your company?
No, it doesn't help the producer at all. The blender who gets the ethanol and blends it into the gasoline, okay? Chevron, Exxon, they're the ones that get the blender's tax credit.
Are you against subsidies for ethanol then? Are you against them?
Ethanol doesn't need a subsidy anymore. What the subsidy was originally put there for was because Brazilian ethanol can be out of sugar cane. You don't have to cook the sugar cane. When you do it out of corn, you've got to grind the corn. It's basically a 150 million or 100 million gallon corn mash whiskey steel. That's what it is. When it comes out, it's Everclear. Then you take the 5% water out, okay? Sugar cane doesn't have that cooking process in it, the corn, so they can produce it for about 51 cents a gallon less. That's what the subsidy was always about, to make a level playing field for the sugar cane from Brazil.
I know how it started. Actually, I don't know as much about it as you, obviously, but I read a little bit about it. But, you know, a lot of, both left and the right have been arguing against these subsidies, as I think you're well aware.
Sure.
Mother Jones, which is a very left-wing magazine, wrote about it. Said after a flirtation with reason last spring, this is from last year. This was written. The Obama EPA, 2010, excuse me. The Obama EPA has signed off on the absurd, abysmal renewable fuel standard established under Bush a couple of years ago, ensuring that farmers will continue to devote vast swaths of land to GHG-intensive corn, of which huge portions will be ultimately set aflame to power cars, but not before being transformed into liquid fuel in an energy-intensive process. You agree with that?
No, I don't. A lot of that is paid for by the oil companies to say what they want to say. Now,
you think Mother Jones is owned by the oil companies?
No, there's a lot of misinformation. Like, everybody thinks there's really subsidies that the ethanol producer gets, and it's simply not true. There are some states, because Iowa, where I built the first 2 plants for the company, that's the cheapest corn. Corn is your largest input cost. So if you can get corn for 25 or 30 cents less a bushel, you can make a lot of money by saving that. So other states like Minnesota and Nebraska, they did subsidies, okay, to try to get people to build ethanol plants in their states, because an ethanol plant in a small town in Iowa will bring that town back to life.
But still, it still needed the subsidies, and I don't think you can completely divorce your company, or even if you want to, from the ethanol subsidies. That indirectly helps you, right?
It helps level the playing field for sugarcane. We don't grow sugarcane here.
I'm a little more upset as a Nevadan. How come that corn wasn't grown here, sir? I'm just kidding. We're going to come back and talk more.
Too dry.
More to Barry Ellsworth about his campaign to unseat Shelley Berkeley and run against Dean Heller. How serious is he? We'll talk about that when Face to Face returns.